Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Gray Matter. Well, if you are like me, you used to put your head on the pillow at night, feeling safe and secure in the integrity of our elections, that they were free and fair. Well, that we've come to question all of that in the aftermath of what happened in the United States in 2020, and also learning in Canada that the Chinese Communist Party has infiltrated our last two national elections. Another thing that was inconceivable to me as a lawyer, or at least I didn't see it coming, is the role that litigation, that lawsuits would play in helping to ensure the integrity of our elections, or perhaps to restore them. So today on the program, we have a Texas lawyer who has a number of high-profile cases working in this space. His name is Jared Woodfill. Welcome to the program, Jared. It's great to have you on Gray Matter today.
Great to be with you. Thanks for having me.
So we're going to dive in. We're going to learn about some of the fascinating work that Jared is doing. But before we do, as we always do, we're going to go to our framing aphorisms. The first one is Lyndon Johnson had lost an election, and he received this letter from FDR who said, "Lyndon, apparently you Texans haven't learned one of the first things we learned up in New York State. That is, when the election is over, you have to sit on the ballot boxes." Next one, kind of along the same lines, from Joseph Stalin, who said, "It is enough that the people know there was an election. The people who cast the votes decide nothing. The people who count the votes decide everything." Next, from former President Barack Obama, who said, "You wouldn't let your grandparents pick your playlist. Why would you let them pick your representative who is going to determine your future?" And finally, from Donald Trump, who says, "They want to silence me because I will never let them silence you. They're not coming after me, they're coming after you. I just have to be standing in their way, and I'm never moving." So, Jared, I want to talk to you about some of these very fascinating cases you're working on. But before we go there, I'm curious, this idea of voter fraud, of trying to fix elections or steal elections. Most of us saw, 2000 Mules, the Dinesh D'Souza's film. Is this idea of cheating in elections, is this something new, or has it been around a long time and is just sort of becoming more and more prevalent?
Well, it's like, the quote you gave about LBJ. LBJ was famous for voter fraud here in the state of Texas in his Senate campaign specifically. So it's not something new. I think it dates back from almost probably time immemorial, if you will, to the time we first had elections. But the way they do it changes every single generation. So in the past it was stuffing ballot boxes. And then you had systems in 2020, let's just say, where they tried to unilaterally change election codes for respective states. But we see a lot of it occurring in the ballot by mail process because that's where the greatest opportunity for fraud is, at least here in Harris County. And so what we have is election officials who will work to make sure that their voter rolls are not actually up to date. They're not clean. They don't follow the law. And so when you have a bad voter roll, that creates an environment that is ripe for voter fraud. And that's what we've been dealing with in Harris County right now. An election official who's responsible for maintaining the voter roll, who actually checked out for about 3.5 years and literally has not been to the office for approximately 3.5 years, is what it's been reported to us. And so we've got a bad voter roll in Harris County. And so that creates a huge opportunity for voter fraud.
This is the case, Holsa versus Bennett. Is that right?
Absolutely.
Would you tell us more about this, how this case arose, and the status of it right now? Because I think it has far-reaching implications, not just for Houston and Texas and the United States, but also for election integrity in general. Could you tell us a bit more about this particular case?
Sure, sure. So the Texas Election Code says that every month the voter registrar here in Harris County, what's the tax assessor collector, needs to take the voter roster and bounce it up against something called the National Change of Address List, put out by the U.S. Postal Service. That allows the voter registrar to know who has moved from the location that's identified on their voter registration card. Once there is a hit between those two databases, or you find a match, then the voter registrar is responsible for putting that individual on what's called a suspense list. So when the individual does show up to the polling location, they're required to fill out what's called a statement of residence under oath, and the individual will have to swear that they live where their voter registration card says they live. Problem is, the voter registrar in Harris County hasn't been doing that. Hasn't been doing it for, we believe, at a minimum of 4 to 6 years. So I took the deposition of the person responsible for voter registration in Harris County, and I asked that person whether they had been doing what the election code requires on a monthly basis, and they said, "Well, we farm it out to a third party." So I went and took the deposition of that third party that was identified, and under oath, the third party said, "No, we've never done it." So we know in Harris County we have a situation where there's a voter roll that is inaccurate. So what we decided to do was do our own match. So we took the national change of address list, bounced it up against the voter registration file, and we found approximately 400,000 plus individuals that arguably should be on the suspense list. And so those are individuals where, we got a voter roll in Harris County of our registered voters, about 2 million folks. You got 400 plus thousand individuals that arguably shouldn't be voting. And then what we've done recently is look to see how many of those individuals voted. And we've identified a little over 150,000 folks. So, that's a big issue here in Harris County. And now what
Hmm.
we're doing is delving into those individuals that we believe cast illegal votes.
This is an interesting example of how litigation can be an engine for legal change or legal reform, or at least restoring integrity. Would you say that the type of litigation that you're doing, let's say this particular case, is more aimed at achieving election reform ultimately, or just really trying to uphold the law and hold the people who are cheating to the black letter of the law? What is it? Is it more one or the other, or kind of a combination?
Well, I think it's a combination. I think you described it perfectly. So it is, with respect to election reform, absolutely. So we believe they need to be following the law. They're not following the law right now. But if the law is unclear, which we don't think it is, but if the Supreme Court tells us that it is, the Texas Supreme Court, then we have an opportunity to clarify it in the next legislative session and make it abundantly clear what needs to be done by the tax assessor collector or the voter registrar of the respective county. At the same time, I think it falls into the second category, because if you have a dirty voter roll, if you will, a roll that is inaccurate, then it's ripe for fraud. What we found a couple years ago is that there were individuals who fell under this in this particular area, who had moved outside of Harris County, in one instance living in another state, and had actually voted in this election. And we contacted those individuals, and that individual said that they had no idea they had voted. And so we also know that there are a whole host of individuals we've identified in the past few cycles that are no longer with us, they've passed away, but they're still voting. So the question becomes, how many of those individuals actually vote? How many of those illegal votes are cast? And does that affect the outcome? And in close elections, it can. In fact, one election contest was successful a few years ago, but you have to pursue it usually in elections or races where the numbers are really tight.
Mhm.
Sometimes we have that occur, sometimes we don't. But ultimately, the goal is to make sure the voter registration roll is accurate, or as accurate as possible, to prevent fraud from occurring in the future.
Mhm. Well, in the aftermath of the most recent presidential elections in the United States, things went very well for Republicans. The popular vote went to the Republicans and to Donald Trump. Presidential election did, and also in both houses. But the people on the other side of the aisle are not content with that, are they? And I noticed you had an appearance recently on radio, and you were talking about and anticipating what you called Democrats prepping post-election lawsuits. What do you foresee coming? This is a little bit ironic considering their reaction to what Donald Trump did in 2020. But what do you foresee coming down the pipe?
Well, they did everything they could to try to stop Donald Trump from being president. I mean, you saw it. You saw the
Yeah,
lawsuits, you saw the criminal prosecutions, and even prior to that, the impeachments. They tried to
they tried to
take his,
shoot him.
yeah, they tried to take his name off the ballot in states.
Yeah,
I mean, it was
yeah.
outrageous and outlandish. And so I don't think it has ended. And so arguably, there will probably be some frivolous lawsuits that are filed in certain states. I thought, given how large the victory was, it makes the likelihood of a lot of suits being filed um, probably not possible. If it had been a tighter race, you probably would have seen a lot more lawsuits. But When I did that interview, obviously it was before the election, but
Mhm.
given how successful President Trump was during this cycle, I think our chances of seeing any lawsuits, much less ones with merit, is very slim at this point in time.
Mhm.
But you're likely to have some lawyer somewhere file a frivolous lawsuit in order to just get attention for that particular lawyer or that particular law firm
Mhm.
or the particular candidate that he's representing.
Mhm. One of the things that the Democrats did in the aftermath of 2020 is they not only criminalized Donald Trump, as you said, but they also prosecuted people for disputing the 2020 election. Do you think that this is something that the Republicans are going to get into? That in situations where there's cheating, where there's voter fraud, where there's impropriety, that we're going to see prosecutions of, say, of Democrats who are involved in this type of thing? Or do you think that the Republicans are going to stick to what they did during Mr. Trump's first administration, where they really didn't go there? The famous case being Hillary, where Donald Trump said, you'd be in jail, but he really didn't. He really didn't go there. In fact, he said publicly he thought that was a bad thing. Do you think that's going to change now in Trump 2.0?
Well, going back to your example, you're right. There were a lot of Republicans prosecuted for standing up for election integrity. In fact, I represent someone right now in Harris County who's been prosecuted for the past over 2 years now. And this individual simply hired a contractor to investigate voter fraud. The contractor was involved in an accident, and our very liberal Democratic DA decided that she was going to prosecute not just the person who was involved in the accident, but also the person that actually hired the contractor. And because the person who hired the individual is a high-profile Republican who's been standing up for conservative causes for 50 years or so now. And so, unfortunately, it happens at all levels. You see it at the national level. You see it with local individuals, like the individual I represent here in Harris County. But I think it's important that we not back down. The reality is we need to be very aggressive with respect to going after voter fraud. We also had another big problem in Texas where, for 50 plus years, the Attorney General of the state of Texas had the ability to prosecute voter fraud. There was a Court of Criminal Appeals opinion, which is the highest criminal court in the state of Texas, that came out just a few years ago that effectively took that power away from the attorney general and gave it to local DAs and local county attorneys, overturning really it was about 70, 71 plus years of jurisprudence in this particular area. Here's the problem with that. In many of these counties that are run by Democrats, the district attorney and the county attorney are Democrats. So when folks that I know would bring allegations of voter fraud to these individuals, it would just get buried and nothing would happen. So the good thing is that three of the individuals that were on the Court of Criminal Appeals, because this was a Republican court, which is what was shocking about it, all
Mhm.
Republicans, but three of those individuals were defeated. And so we're hopeful that that power can be given back, not just to the attorney general, but allow the DA and allow the county attorney, allow them all to have the ability to prosecute voter fraud instead of allowing just one entity or one local group to do it, because that's just like the fox guarding the henhouse. And that's why
Mhm.
it's so important that we allow both the AG, the county attorney, and the district attorneys to do it. So, yes, when there's real evidence of voter fraud, I mean, you need to go after it, because if you
Mhm.
don't, then it just continues to happen. And the penalties need to be severe in order to send a message to others. Because if my vote is cast and it's a legal vote and somebody else goes and casts an illegal vote, then my vote was effectively canceled. And we can't have that occurring. I don't think we should engage in frivolous prosecutions. I don't think we should engage in prosecutions as a result or in response to prosecutions in the past, meaning as a form of retaliation. I think we should look and see if there are merits behind the underlying allegations, and if so, then move forward.
Mhm. You're also involved in some other controversial issues. One of them is about border security. This is something that is obviously very important to you and your firm. Texas is a border state, very much impacted by this. And so you tweeted out, "Time to get serious about border security." What did you have in mind there? And what do you mean by getting serious about border security?
Well, right now we have, the Biden administration, there is no such thing as border security. I mean, we have a very porous border, and obviously Texas is a large point of entry. And so, I mean, I think the last time I looked, the number was approximately 300,000 or so minors that are unaccounted for. I mean, that's outrageous. I
Hmm.
mean, how can anyone in good conscience say that's okay? And so I think from day one, President Trump will put back in place the return to Mexico policy, which I think is extremely important. And with Holman in place, I mean, we've got someone who is really serious about border security now. So not only do we have a president who's serious about border security, but Tom Homan's very serious about border security. And I think we're going to see, obviously, a reversal of all the Biden policies. And I think you're going to see a lot of folks who have come here illegally, specifically criminals, members of cartels and gangs, and those who are trying to do harm to America and Americans, those individuals be the first to be rounded up and deported. And then I think after that, Holman will work to make sure we remove or send those individuals back who came here legally back to their country of origin. And hey, if you want to come to America, just do it the right way. Come here legally. I mean, we let over 1 million folks in legally every single year. And to allow folks to come in illegally is to essentially a slap in the face to those individuals who respected our laws and went through the legal process to come to this country.
Hmm. It almost breaks the promise to people who are emigrating to places like the United States and Canada by not maintaining the integrity of that immigration system. Because if you don't do that, you discover that your communities are not the kinds of places that people want to immigrate to. Would you agree? I mean, that we really have a duty to ensure the integrity of that immigration system, so that places like America and Canada remain America and Canada. Otherwise, why are people? Why would anybody want to come here?
That's exactly right. And under the Biden administration, we have not had that. And
Yeah.
so we know what President Trump will do because he did it for 4 years, from 2016 to 2020. And so we know that he's very serious about border security. And you look at the people that he's putting in place right now to run the respective offices that are or cabinet positions that will deal with that particular issue, and they're strong. They're
Hmm.
very strong on the issue. And so, I've been very impressed by the individuals that he's chosen as part of his cabinet.
Hmm.
And so, I'm not surprised, but I've been extremely impressed, and I think it's going to make a huge difference in reversing the 4 years of bad policies and the implications, the negative implications
Hmm.
that have resulted from those 4 years of bad policies.
Hmm. One question I have for you is maybe a little bit outside your lane, but I suspect it's not. And that is, do you agree with me that there's an undercurrent of faith, Christian faith in MAGA, and that is going to that's going to impact the types of laws and policies that the Trump administration is going to invoke in your country?
Oh, absolutely. There's absolutely no doubt about that. I mean, the reality is, if you look at the MAGA movement, if you will, which is the individuals that are behind it, they're mostly evangelical Christians, born again Christian believers, and we all appreciate the fact that there is a spiritual battle that is going on too. And so we win that on our hands and knees praying, but at
Yeah.
the same time, we need to take action. We need to be the individuals that get involved. And so when one's faith motivates them to action, to get involved, to support a candidate, that's how this revolution, I think, began with respect to MAGA. It's individual, faith based, Bible believing Christians who said enough was enough. And they got behind a candidate who wasn't a traditional candidate, someone who had not spent their entire career in politics, but someone who was a businessman and actually spoke to their faith and was unashamed of the faith of the individuals that were supporting this man and President Trump. And that's what folks love about President Trump. He doesn't just talk the talk, he actually walks the walk. And I think he understands and appreciates that the evangelical Christians were the individuals that I believe were the backbone behind getting him elected, not just through their hard work, but through being on their hands and knees and fighting the spiritual battle, the spiritual war that occurs. And so, I'm just glad that we have a president now who I believe will put his faith at the forefront. And I think personally that he's grown a lot through these
Mhm.
elections in his walk with the Lord. I think
Yeah.
he's grown a lot spiritually over the past, however, 12 years it's been now, well, since 2016, and he's changed a lot. And so I'm optimistic and I'm excited, but I think you're absolutely right. There's a huge spiritual component behind the MAGA movement.
Hmm. One person who is evidently not connected to the Lord is our current Prime Minister in Canada, Justin Trudeau. He was recently summoned down to Mar-a-Lago to meet with President Trump. And, Justin Trudeau has become really an avatar for globalism. Uh, if you go look at the World Economic Forum's agenda, it's basically been promulgated into every area of Canadian life, much to our detriment. Donald Trump in February of 2022, speaking in the context of the truckers convoy, actually vowed to free Canada from the tyranny of Justin Trudeau. So it's going to be fascinating to see whether the Trump administration takes more of a sincere interest in the domestic politics of Canada, because unfortunately, perhaps for the first time since 1812, because of Canada's close connection to China, Canada actually poses a geopolitical threat to the safety and security of the U.S. Do you think that perhaps the Trump administration is going to take a closer look at certainly what's happening on its northern border because of what's happening in Canada?
Yeah, absolutely, I do, and you're already seeing that through Homan's comments,
Yeah.
and through some of President Trump's comments. So I think that we are appreciating the fact that not only do we have a huge illegal immigration problem through our southern border, but we also have it at the northern border too with
Hmm.
Canada.
Hmm. Yeah.
And so I think for too long now we've ignored the illegal immigration issue as it relates to our northern border, but it is a serious problem there. I mean,
Yes.
recently I heard of suspected terrorists coming through that particular through the
Hmm.
northern border. I think you're seeing more of that happening through the northern border. Well, I wouldn't say more, but you're seeing a lot of that occurring through the northern border as opposed to the southern border, because I think those individuals think that the focus is only on the southern border. But I
Hmm.
think Homan and President Trump appreciate the fact that there is a big problem with our northern border too. And if we're going to protect this country, if we're going to make sure that we have a national security with respect to this issue, you not only have to deal with the southern border, but you also have to deal with our northern
Hmm.
border. And I'm proud to see that they're taking that seriously now.
Yeah, me too. And it saddens me to know that Canada is a net exporter of fentanyl and that the United States is its chief customer. That is a real travesty. Well, folks, this has been just a refreshing conversation with a very interesting person, Jared Woodfill. Jared, you really must write a book at some point. I know you don't have time because you're so busy litigating these cases, but I think if you wrote a book, it would be a bestseller. And by way of segue, that takes us into our reading list. I'm going to ask you for an idea or two about books that people could read that would enhance their understanding of some of the things that you've been talking about, perhaps some of the cases you're working on. But I'm going to add two to our reading list that are of some relevance here. One is 2000 Mules. This is a book by Dinesh D'Souza, who is a brilliant author and also a documentary filmmaker. Most people have seen this film or at least heard about it. It documents the real evidence, the shocking evidence of the cheating that went on during the 2020 presidential election. The second one is by a fellow Texan, someone I admire very much, and also a lawyer, a former lawyer, Ted Cruz. And this book is called Justice Corrupted: How the Left Weaponized Our Legal System. So this is a really, I thought, an interesting book and kind of a companion to the work that our guest, Jared Woodfill, is doing. Jared, do you have a selection or two that you would point people to
Yeah,
that
well,
are useful
Dinesh's
for you?
book is what I was going to mention too. That is an amazing book. I mean, anyone who has not read it, I would recommend that they read it. The book I really like too is one that Clarence Thomas wrote on the court. That's a fabulous book for anyone who has not read it. Just to see a justice's perspective into the court, I thought was fabulous. I mean, there's a lot of great books out there. Number one book, obviously, you need to read daily is the Bible.
The
It gives you
Bible.
gives you the most wisdom. I can assure you of that. But after
Yeah.
you've done your Bible reading for the day, all those books that you and I just discussed are
Mhm.
fabulous.
Well, thanks very much for that. And but I would be remiss if I didn't ask you one last question. Uh, President Biden has exercised his discretion to pardon his son. And many people are divided on this. They think some think it's a proper exercise of discretion. Others think that this is nepotism and it's improper. What do you think? What's your take?
Well, I think it just proves what we knew all along, that you can't trust President Biden. I mean, what did he say when he was campaigning? He was not going to pardon his son. He
Yeah.
wasn't. And so what happens? He does it. I don't think anyone's really surprised by that. I think we all realize is that was just campaign rhetoric and that he didn't mean it, like most of the things that he said. And so, no, I think it was extremely inappropriate. Any other individual who committed the same crimes would be, the book would be thrown at them. And what's so hypocritical about it is if you look at his press secretary's comments and even his comments, he just ignores the fact that his Justice Department has viciously gone after President Trump and anyone who would oppose the Biden administration. Where are the pardons for those individuals? What about all the January 6 individuals
Mm-hmm.
who are sitting in prison right now or in jails right now, either waiting for their trials or have been given prison terms well in excess of what would happen to any other individual who shared a different political viewpoint. So it's what we expect from President Biden. It's the reason this country overwhelmingly gave President Trump the majority mantle during this last election cycle. So if anything good came out of it, it was that we now have 4 more years of President Trump and a real opportunity to change this
Mm-hmm.
country.
Well, let's pray that that type of corruption is long gone. But in the meanwhile, it's good to know that there are dedicated, principled, courageous lawyers like you out there willing to fight it and to fight on behalf of integrity and the integrity of elections and free and fair elections. So we want to thank you very much for being our special guest here, Jared. It's been our pleasure talking with you and getting to know you better, and we wish you much success in all of your future endeavors.
Well, thank you for having me. It's an honor to be with you. And thank you for all you do. It's because of individuals like you who stand up, who refuse to give up, and continue to be loud, clear voices for our conservative values. That's how we're taking this country back.
Thanks, Jared. God bless.
Thank you. God bless you too.